Imagine standing on the tarmac of Tempelhof Airport as dawn breaks, but instead of bread drops, you're watching crates of glinting gold bars being unloaded under a mesh of buzzsaw whispers. It sounds like a Hollywood spy flick, right? But this was Berlin, 1948, and the stakes were real. The Soviet blockade had choked off West Berlin's lifelines, and the Allies flew in food and coal by the ton. Yet behind the scenes, something even more valuable was moving. Tons of gold slipping through the black market back channels that made Bitcoin traders look like amateurs. How did the US military and British treasurers ensure those bars arrived intact, untaxed by cheeky Soviet customs officers? What shadowy figures counted the fins stamped with mint marks faster than a Vegas croupier? And why did a single missing brick almost bring the whole operation crashing down? Think of it as 007 meets Monopoly. High-flying C-54 Skymasters, secret Swiss numbered accounts, and a financial tightrope walk over an iron curtain razor wire. Stay with me, because in the next 60 seconds, you'll hear about a mysterious code phrase so bizarre, even the bankers cracked jokes about it and laughed right before the bullets flew. Are you ready to uncover the rabbit hole? Now let's wind the clock back to 1948 and set the stage for this financial drama. Berlin had been cleaved in two since 1945, with the Soviets controlling the eastern half and the Americans, British, and French running the west. By June of '48, the Kremlin slammed the door shut on every rail car, barge, and road convoy bound for West Berlin, hoping to starve the city into submission. In response, the U.S. Army Air Forces and the Royal Air Force kicked off the Berlin airlift, flying in over 200,000 sorties to deliver coal, flour, and medicine. But even these steel birds needed to be paid for, and that's where our story really takes off. At the heart of the operation was General Lucius Clay, the no-nonsense U.S. military governor, who famously quipped that he'd rather die standing than live kneeling. On the British side, Lord Brian Robertson, Winston Churchill's hand-picked military governor, balanced stiff upper lip resolve with a wry sense of humor. Just the right personality to negotiate under absurd pressure. Behind them loomed the Treasury chiefs, America's young finance wizard John Snyder, and Britain's Stafford Cripps, whose job was to ensure each C-54 Skymaster, packed nose to tail with supplies, had a banking guarantee that wouldn't bounce. Officially, the Allies were supposed to foot the bill through the Marshall Plan's credit lines, backed by gold reserves sitting in vaults from Washington to London. But reality was messier than a spilled crate of bullion. Europe's banking system was in tatters, and moving tons of gold through customs, legal or not, would have tripped every alert from Berlin to Basel. Enter the black market brokers, shadowy financiers who traded in hedge arbitrage. That's when you offset one bet with another to limit risk. Offshore trusts, shell companies in neutral havens, and sometimes outright bribery and money laundering. Fancy words for making dirty money look clean. Imagine Mr. Klaus Goldfinger Bauer, a mild-mannered ex-bank clerk turned freelance broker, rifling through suitcases full of Reichsmarks and Reichsbank certificates. He'd work contacts at the Swiss Bank Corporation, where numbered accounts were practically a public service, and secure gold bars stamped Federal Reserve, rerouting them through Geneva and Zurich in clandestine caravans. On the U.S. side, Colonel James Hamilton, an Army Air Force's logistics officer, kept an eye on every ingot via a handwritten ledger that read like a spy novel. Code names, serial numbers, and dead drop locations. Meanwhile, whispers circulated about high-roller investment tycoons, names like the Lehman Brothers, profiling profits from currency arbitrage between post-war Deutsche Marks and Allied occupation marks. They treated Berlin's desperate economy like a high-stakes poker game, betting on exchange rate shifts and pocketing the spread. But for every clever arbitrage play, there was a risk. If a single gold bar went missing, the Soviets would cry foul, accuse the Allies of war profiteering, and threaten to shoot down supply planes. So while the Allies publicly touted flour, coal, and medicine, behind the scenes they were running a financial tightrope act, balancing on a razor's edge of bureaucracy, black market ingenuity, and good old colonial-era smarts. By the end of this module, you'll see how those vault-to-vault gold shipments actually worked, and why one botched trade nearly triggered an international incident. Stay tuned. Now buckle up. We're about to unravel a chain of tantalizing breadcrumbs that kept Berlin and the world on the edge of its seat. From coded ledgers to phantom informants, each revelation felt like peeling back another layer of the Iron Curtain, leaving everyone asking, what happens next? First, our initial breadcrumb dropped in the form of Colonel James Hamilton's handwritten ledger. Amid neatly inked entries for coal and canned meat, there appeared a ghost line. Operation Seahorse, 1,000 ounces. No standard supply code looked like that. Why Seahorse? Hamilton later admitted he chose an innocuous sea creature so Soviet censors would glance right past it, like hiding a diamond in plain sight. That mysterious entry set tongues wagging among Allied accountants. If it wasn't coal or medicine, what cargo required such cloak and dagger bookkeeping? Speaking of cloak and dagger, clue number 2 surfaced when a whisper reached the halls of Tempelhof's command center about an MI6 agent known only as Blue Saxon. He wasn't loading bombs. He was sliding diplomatic pouches stuffed with gold certificates past Soviet checkpoints. These weren't your grandpa's gold certificates either. They were instruments of hedge arbitrage, a highfalutin term meaning you offset one bet with another to limit your risk. In this case, betting that Allied-issued marks would hold value against the freshly printed East German currency. As I explain hedge arbitrage, think of it as juggling 2 apples, so if you drop one, you still have the other to show off. Meanwhile, deep in the vaulted chambers of the Swiss Bank Corporation, financiers were spinning another web of intrigue. Offshore trusts, shell companies registered in neutral havens, were the equivalent of secret grab bags letting brokers transfer gold bars stamped Federal Reserve without a customs inspector ever asking for ID. It looked legal on paper, a fine line between ingenious and really, guys? I mean, swapping gold for gold in a blind trust sounds like a magic trick, but it kept planes flying, engines humming, and Soviet suspicions simmering. Then came the third clue, like a thunderbolt in a clear sky. On August 14th, a C-54 returning from Tegel to Rhine-Main simply evaporated from the manifest. One entire cargo hold of ingots, each stamped with a unique serial number, had no official record of arrival. Panic calls echoed through Allied headquarters. Had the Soviets shot it down? Was it a staged disappearance to spark an international incident? Colonel Hamilton's team deployed spotter planes to comb the Spree River. Divers scoured the Wannsee, but no wreckage, no bullion, only echoes of vanished wealth. Who dared to dine on Allied assets? Suspicions swirled around Klaus Bauer's network, rumored to use bribery and money laundering, fancy words for paying off guards and cleaning dirty cash, to skim bars off the top. Imagine paying a customs officer the equivalent of a week's ration for each kilo you smuggle. Bribery in its simplest form, and then running that money through shell accounts so neat even Sherlock Holmes would tip his hat. The Allies needed every ounce of gold to back their occupation marks. A single bar lost was like dropping the final brick in a dam. By this point, every rustle in the Berlin night sounded like an alarm bell. Informants codenamed Red Fox and Grey Owl surfaced with snippets of overheard meetings at smoky backroom cafes. Even General Clay grumbled that managing gold transfers was more nerve-wracking than dodging angry Soviet MiGs. And we fly through flak for breakfast, he joked. Each clue dovetailed into the next, ratcheting tension higher than a POW's pulse at dawn. Stay on your toes. Up next, we'll crack the vault door on the climax and reveal how the Allies outsmarted every blockade, every black market broker, and every bureaucratic hurdle to keep gold flowing and Berlin breathing. You won't believe the evidence we unearthed. Here's where the curtain lifts and the final act of this vault heist unfolds. Every ledger entry, every coded communique, and every clandestine handshake converges into a jaw-dropping revelation. Brace yourself, because the Allies didn't just outfox the blockade, they rewrote the rules of post-war finance. It all started on September 3rd, 1948, when a declassified memo from General Clay landed on John Snyder's desk in Washington. Titled Operation Golden Bridge, it outlined a daring scheme. Instead of shipping physical gold bars, Allied financiers would execute a series of rapid gold swaps and letters of credit across banks in Zurich, London, and New York. In plain English, they created a cross-border IOU chain so seamless that by the time a gold bar left London, its value had already been credited to a Berlin vault site unseen. Think of it as emailing money before the email even arrives. And no, your bank doesn't let you do that today. Behind the scenes, Stafford Cripps and Colonel Hamilton orchestrated synchronized transactions. A Swiss numbered account, nicknamed Project Lollipop for reasons no one could satisfactorily explain, would debit 500,000 US dollars against gold reserves in New York, then immediately credit the same amount to a British account in London, which in turn issued a letter of credit to Berlin's Allied Bank. Each step bore the stamp of fiduciary duty, the legal duty to act in another party's interest. Except here, the other party was an entire city under siege. It was finance's equivalent of a high-wire act without a safety net. One misposted entry, and the whole network would collapse like a house of cards. But there was a snag. Our old friend Klaus Bauer had gone missing right when the final confirmation was due. His Swiss contacts reported that he vanished from Geneva, leaving behind a briefcase stuffed with unmarked currency and a note reading only, "Danke und auf Wiedersehen." Panic spread through Allied operations. If Bauer flipped sides or was captured, the Soviets would instantly trace the swap chain back to Berlin, accuse the Allies of illicit profiteering, and possibly shoot down supply planes on site. That single rogue broker had become the keystone holding the entire edifice in place. Enter clue number 4, the audacious Red Eagle telegram intercepted by G2 intelligence. Addressed to MI6 6HQ in London, it read, "Gold bridge intact, awaiting Code Phoenix." Investigators finally cracked Code Phoenix, a reference to a specially designed cipher machine smuggled into Tegel Airport. By routing confirmation codes through encrypted radio bursts disguised as weather bulletins, for example, "Tomorrow's sky is clear with 500 ounces of gold incoming," the Allies ensured every terminal received real-time updates without tipping off Soviet eavesdroppers. If you've ever wondered how encrypted messaging works, imagine texting your buddy, "Pizza tonight?" when you really mean meet at dead drop. Except this time, pizza and gold were the same thing. Meanwhile, in a smoky backroom cafe near Potsdamer Platz, an international informant, known only as Grey Owl, handed over a bundle of microfilm showing the exact serial numbers of each gold bar credited to Berlin's vault. That film, no bigger than a postage stamp, became Exhibit A in an emergency session at the Allied Control Council. As each serial number flashed on the projector, bankers gasped. Every bar was accounted for. The Soviets, expecting a juicy scandal, found nothing but airtight records and impeccable audit trails. The forensic path each dollar or ounce of gold takes through the financial system. One final twist. A post-operation audit revealed that the Allies had even turned a small profit on currency arbitrage. By exploiting a temporary mismatch between the London and Frankfurt gold-to-dollar exchange rates, they earned enough to subsidize an additional 2 weeks of flower drops. In other words, the blockade backfired. The very mechanism meant to strangle West Berlin ended up making their financial operations leaner and more profitable, like paying interest on a loan and getting a cash rebate. So here's the kicker. When the Soviets lifted the blockade in May 1949, they expected to gloat over Allied financial ruin. Instead, they discovered a city alive and thriving, banks fully funded, and gold reserves intact. Wrapped in a web of swaps, letters of credit, and encrypted weather reports. The black market gold operation became a masterclass in clandestine finance. A reminder that in the world of money, the sharpest weapon isn't a gun, it's information, timing, and the ability to juggle decimal points faster than your pocket calculator can keep up. And if you ever think your 401k statements are complex, just remember, none of this made it into standard accounting textbooks. It was finance at its funniest, its most professional, and its most suspenseful. Equal parts Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, and Gordon Gekko. As the Iron Curtain's grip finally loosened and the blockade lifted, West Berlin emerged not only nourished and warm, but armed with a financial blueprint that still resonates today. What began as a life-or-death struggle for coal and bread evolved into a covert ballet of gold swaps, encrypted weather reports, and microfilm detective work. Proof that when politicians draw battle lines, financiers draw lifelines. The black market gold operation teaches us that true power often lies in creativity, turning vault codes into ciphered poetry, transforming shell companies into silent guardians, and converting a potential disaster into a profit and purpose engine. For today's investors and everyday savers, the lesson is clear. Markets are living ecosystems, capable of surprising rebounds when innovation or ingenuity shakes their foundations. Whether you're juggling cryptocurrencies or plain old blue-chip stocks, remember that hedging isn't just a hedge fund buzzword, it's your portfolio's seatbelt. Offshore trusts might sound like insider lingo, but at its heart, it's about diversifying your risk landscape, just as the Allies diversified their gold routes beyond customs checkpoints. And if you ever feel your retirement plan is under siege, channel your inner General Clay. Stand tall, think 2 moves ahead, and don't let bureaucratic blockades derail your strategy. Now ponder this. In our modern digital age, what gold swaps are hiding behind the screens of blockchain ledgers and encrypted transactions? Could today's black market tactics teach tomorrow's regulators a thing or two about resilience? And as data becomes the new currency, will our own coded communiques prove as vital as those Operation Golden Bridge telegrams? In the end, black market gold wasn't just a wartime workaround, it was a testament to human ingenuity under fire. It reminds us that in the world of finance, the most precious resource isn't bullion, it's trust. Trust that ledgers balance, trust that codes hold, and trust that, despite every blockade, we can still find a way forward. If this tale of daring deals and shadowy ledgers sparked your curiosity, tap that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring the bell so you never miss another financial thriller. Drop a comment below. What secret chapter of history should we unearth next? Until then, keep questioning, keep investing, and keep your calculators close.